expectations of Afghans. Because especially galling for the Afghans who read a translation of McChrystal's report, was his charge that the coalition had not sufficiently studied the people, their various needs, identities and grievances, as he put it. And let me tell you that in tribal society in particular, the existence of grievances and the ability to manipulate them gives you power. That is power, that is control at a local level. You know, if you put to one side Washington's empowerment of warlords and militias at the time of the invasion, the arm twisting to force the result that they wanted at the Bonn conference, there's been no shortage of reports on human rights expectations of Afghans in the aftermath of the Taliban. The amount of work that was done on what Afghan people genuinely wanted and expected in terms of their right to live in a non-violent environment has been colossal, and it has been ignored and deliberately ignored. It was done by various arms of the United Nations, it was done by Human Rights Watch, and perhaps most courageously of all, an Afghan human rights expert by the name of Nader Nadri and his team at the Afghan Independent Human Rights Commission. They polled literally thousands of Afghans. They sent something like 8,000 pollsters around the country doing a poll that would put any opinion poll conducted in the US or in Europe these days to shame in terms of the number of people who were questioned and interviewed on what they wanted. And what came through was the yearning for a break from violence and corruption and from predators who were the architects of decades of misery in Afghanistan, a good number of who were re-empowered by the Western forces when they arrived in the aftermath of the Taliban being routed. And when you get to notions of victory, what might victory look like in Afghanistan, I think many Afghans would be offended, and rightly offended, by McChrystal's limited recipe, if you like, for holding Karzai, the central government in Kabul, to account. He wrote, "Success does not require perfection. An improvement, so any improvement in governance that addresses the worst of today's high-level abuses of power, low-level corruption, and bureaucratic incapacity will suffice." I mean, why impose that on people? It's incredible that he could write that the coalition, this is what he says of the coalition's operation: Afghan social, political, economic and cultural affairs are complex and poorly understood by us. We don't sufficiently appreciate the dynamic in local communities, nor how the insurgency, corruption, incompetent officials, power brokers and criminality combine to affect the Afghan population. And they don't even know when the local having to build between Post, which is right on the border, and very near Fob Chapman, where the CIA unit was attacked last week, and the provincial centre of Gardez. So it's called the KG Road.
Where's Gardez?
Sorry?
Where's Gardez?
Gardez is between Host and Kabul, on the main ring road that. So this road would feed into the main ring road that runs around the country. This assignment required me to spend several weeks with the American military, during which I interviewed a U.S. military intelligence officer, and he actually invoked the film Deliverance in describing the people and their culture locally. He said to me, this is the West Virginia of Afghanistan. He says, the people, we were talking about the Zadran tribe, a very, very noble tribe, very powerful, proud tribe. But what he said was, they moved to the mountains centuries ago, and he says they did not evolve. So I was taken aback when he said that, but I went to another office, and I was shocked when one of his colleagues shared a section of a classified study with me. This was commissioned by the Americans from 3 anthropologists who likened the local Zadran tribe to others in the border region before stating, and I quote, and he read it to me off a screen, he would not give me the document, he read it to me, that the 3 anthropologists commissioned by the Americans said of the Zadran, describing them, he said, from which we may infer that they are utter savages. You'll often hear that things are going to be all right in Afghanistan because the locals don't support the Taliban. And the implication is they do support us. Of course, it's not about us and the Taliban. I mentioned earlier the notion of the believability of the Taliban as opposed to the lack of credibility on the part of the Americans. McChrystal points out that there's a problem with the coalition's fixation with violence, which he says has masked the insurgency's capacity to infiltrate into the daily life of the ordinary Afghan people. He makes the point, and we've heard it again and again, and this seeming inability to turn it around. They set up local shadow governments, arranging courts and levying their own taxes. They appoint their own officials and manipulate local grievances. Locals who stand in their way are gunned down or beheaded. That doesn't happen too often, as I said, because the threat to behead is believed. In stating the popular enthusiasm for the insurgents to be limited, McChrystal is missing the point for the reason that I gave you, that it's who is believable, it's not who is credible on the ground, it's who is to be believed. In assessing the insurgency, McChrystal declares them, and you notice I'm referring to the insurgency as it or them because they're very distinct groups within what we generally refer to as the Taliban in Afghanistan. Some of them are groups within a broad Taliban, but some of them are not even part of the Taliban. They're different organizations altogether. But in assessing the insurgency, McChrystal describes them as sophisticated, organized, adaptive, determined and nuanced across all lines of operations, with the capacity to exhaust the coalition and to prevent Kabul from governing the country. Especially disturbing is his conclusion. There are no clear lines separating insurgent groups, criminal networks, including narcotics and corrupt government officials. Malign actors within the government support insurgent groups directly, support criminal networks that are linked to the insurgents, and support corruption that helps feed the insurgency. Circles within circles. And all of that didn't come, and this is me, not McChrystal, all of that didn't come into being with a puff of smoke in the last few months. Yeah, that was carefully, if you like, or recklessly, if you like, managed into place by the West. The Taliban is stronger, more violent, and more in control than at any greater rate, and hundreds of billions of dollars are being squandered for no apparent return. Public and political support for the war has peaked and is now declining in the US and in other coalition countries. And as Hamid Karzai continues to demonstrate with his election fraud and his response to its exposure, the Kabul government is rotten to the core. As Obama was considering what to do, not with the current increase in troops, but the increase, the 28,000 extra that he sent in March last year, I spoke to one of his generals at Bagram in Afghanistan, and on the numbers that might be needed. The general pulled out his counterinsurgency manual. The graphs are, and the formula are all there. He was going to do it back of an envelope calculation for me, but totaling the figures at the time for this total security operation in the country, totaling the nascent Afghan security forces, and adding in the 65,000 foreign troops that were in the country at the time, he arrived at a total security force of 215,000. But based on the doctrine, the US doctrine that talks of one